It's finally time to talk about the GameCube. This console is in a particularly difficult spot when it comes to accessibility to modern players, and we will delve further into that later in this video. For now, it's time to relive some of my childhood memories and discuss how well one of my favorite GameCube games ever has aged. As I mentioned before, this console was the one that established my love for gaming. I started with the N64, but then the GameCube is what really defined my childhood. One of the most important games for me was Mario Kart Double Dash because it was the first sequel I was extremely excited for. Again, we are going to be answering the age-old question if this one is worth playing today. If you have not seen my breakdown of Mario Kart 64, be sure to check that out as well, since I did a similar analysis for that one. I'll just start by saying that Double Dash is probably the most unique game in the series, since there are a ton of elements that were never repeated. So, right off the bat, we have a good case for playing it today. As usual, the video will be split into several categories. We'll start by breaking down the gameplay into the subcategories of control, courses, and difficulty. Then we'll get into other topics such as soundtrack, artwork, and the game's risk of becoming lost media. Lastly, this game has immense nostalgic value for me, and I have some good stories from my childhood to share with you all as well. Right away, turning in Double Dash feels like a significant improvement over that in Mario Kart 64. Gone is that kind of awkward stiffness, and instead this game has a very bouncy feeling to it. The turning's not perfect, but it is leagues improved over the predecessor. However, my favorite thing to note with the control change is how the drifting feels in Double Dash. You can get the mini turbo so easily in this game that it's actually possible to drift in a zigzag back and forth on the straight segments. It seems like the game was never intended to be played this way since the computer players never do it, but it is very fun to mess around with. I do see the argument against this drifting style though. Now the game becomes way more centered around drifting than anything else. In Mario Kart 64, I don't chase the mini turbo nearly as much as I do in Double Dash. At times, it certainly does feel like the only thing I'm looking for in a race is the next opportunity to push R and flick around the joystick. Ultimately, I still really like the mechanic because it is super fun to do. I also am at least not fully comfortable drifting like a maniac on every course. For example, I hardly drift at all on Rainbow Road compared to something like Baby Park, and that's especially true then once we get into the higher difficulties. The controls can also have a very different feeling going from small to medium to large characters. Typically, I always played as small characters on Double Dash who have lower top speeds but faster acceleration. That is until I picked 150cc, but we'll get to that. This also leads me to another point of praise in that you get new unlocks for winning gold on pretty much every cup in Double Dash. For the most part, you are unlocking new cars for the 3 different classes. Even though I almost exclusively played small, I still felt like unlocking all the different cars was very fun. Another oddity of Double Dash's controls is that you cannot hold items behind your cart for defensive purposes. You have to time a banana throw with the shell coming at you. This can be a little challenging, and I would say it's maybe my biggest issue with the controls compared to other games. They could have made it so the item doesn't disappear from the slot once you're holding it. I understand not wanting the player to be able to get 3 items at a time, and not have too much item spam in the game. Ultimately, it's something I'm not a huge fan of, but it is something I can adjust to over time. I'll always prefer being able to hold the item in back of the car though. Of course, the biggest innovation in the controls is the ability to switch drivers with the Z button. This concept is one of the many unique aspects of Double Dash, and it's maybe the most obvious. I wish Nintendo would have done this more than this one time. I remember being distinctly disappointed when I learned that Mario Kart Wii featured only one driver before that game came out. That felt like a step backwards. There was an opportunity to make 2 drivers a staple feature of the series, but they chose not to. However, that just gives me all the more reason to recommend Double Dash now in modern times, and to possibly even consider it the best in the series. Double Dash has numerous tracks that still shine today, but there are a few that feel a bit outdated. For example, I'll assert that this game does not have the best Bowser Castle by any means. When I look at something like Mario Kart 8, I feel like Double Dash always wanted to be as cool as this one. Of course though, when I was a kid, this Bowser Castle was insane. It's just now that it feels a little old since we have so many more new Bowser Castles. Some of my favorites that still hold up are Daisy Cruiser, DK Mountain, Wario Coliseum, and of course Rainbow Road. My favorite Rainbow Road in the entire series is without a doubt Double Dash's. It's practically the perfect finale. The difficulty is way higher than something like the N64's, but it's not too insane. There's a lot of opportunities to fall off the stage, but we do get some guardrails here and there. The speed boosting around the cylindrical part here in the middle is incredibly fun, and I love looking at the city down below as well. Also, the fact that the shooting stars can hit the track and make an actual star appear was always incredibly cool to me. Later we will also be discussing this track's amazing music and how the visuals are still really impressive to me. 2 of the 16 main tracks also feature a lap count that is not 3, Baby Park and Wario Coliseum. Baby Park may seem like a fun, hectic course when you first play it, but after years and years, including the Mario Kart 8 remaster, I've grown really tired of this one. It's just a circle with a ton of items going around at all times. Racing on this course for 7 laps each time is like somebody telling the same joke over and over and over again, expecting it to be more funny each time. However, Wario Coliseum displays some more common sense in that it is only 2 laps. Thank goodness, because just look at the map here. Does anybody want to do this 3 times? Maybe they learned their lesson from N64 Rainbow Road. This course is one of my favorites since you go through all these different elevation changes and fly around on these rails. Also, the big jump across the middle at the end is so fun. Anyone who opts to go around this needs to question whether or not they like having fun when playing video games. Generally, the courses are a bit wider in Double Dash when compared to Mario Kart 64. This trend continues as the games get easier and easier with each new console entry. Double Dash strikes a nice balance, I think, today. They are not nearly as wide as the courses in like Mario Kart 8, but not brutally tight like some of them in 64. Some courses like Dry Dry Desert are incredibly easy to drift across the entire thing. However, once I get to Special Cup, I find myself not being nearly as greedy with the drifting. The courses all fit their respective cups in this game, unlike how I felt about 64. It doesn't seem like anything is unreasonably hard due to course design or controls. Establishing this idea of a more fair-feeling challenge is critical to our next segment. Unlike Mario Kart 64 with its rubber-banded AI, this game allows the player to absolutely demolish the competition if you can get far ahead enough. This change was probably for the best since many people could not stand the rubber-banded AI in 64. Here is where I'm thankful that I can zigzag drift since I need something to do when I'm so far ahead in 50cc. The fact that we can have 2 items may make the game feel like there's a lot more item spam when compared to 64, however, I would have to maybe disagree. There are certainly a fair amount of shells and bananas floating around in Double Dash, but the AI uses bananas constantly in 64 as well. The item spam issues in Mario Kart seem to ramp up to unreasonable levels in Wii and 8, in my experiences at least. Prior to playing on 150cc, I was actually never blue shelled in this run for Double Dash. However, upon firing up 150cc, this game throws everything it has at you. The difficulty spike between 100s and 150s is insane in Double Dash. Here's the first instance of me getting blue shelled while recording at least. This was absolutely heartbreaking. The need for you to be able to push people around in Double Dash is also really strong. Early game, as a small racer, you can get absolutely annihilated and put in a position beyond recovery. Therefore, I hung up playing as small characters in the little bullet bill car in favor of Bowser's big-ass six-wheeler and became the villain. With that switch, I noticed 150cc became a lot more manageable, at least in the beginning of the races. Another thing that can swing the difficulty in one direction or another is the fact that each character pairing has a unique item. This concept is also another innovation that was not carried forward for the rest of the series. I find this idea to be extremely fun, and it makes it worth playing as the other characters to use their items. Some may argue then, though, that this creates a tier list of characters being distinctly better than others. Sure, I'll give you that, but a little imbalance is okay. Part of why I always pick one of the Koopas is because I think 3 shells is one of the best specials in the game. If I were to pick somebody like Peach, Daisy, or either of the Baby Brothers, I may not get my special item all that often, unless I'm getting my ass beat on 150s. Mario Kart Double Dash has one of the coolest race modes of all time, the All Cup Tour. You play all 16 races in a single marathon. It always starts with Luigi's Circuit and it always ends with Rainbow Road, but then everything in the middle is randomized. This mode is a total endurance round, and I understand why it was never brought back. I ran through it on 50cc, and my recording file was 49 minutes and a couple seconds, so rounded up to, it takes about an hour to get through this mode. I'm sure some players found this incredibly time-consuming and frustrating as all hell to lose. I remember one time losing the entire thing by 1 point on mirror mode, and it was the last gold trophy I needed to get them all when I was a kid. Instead, they took the idea of remixing the old courses into additional cups and made that the new norm for Mario Kart moving forward. However, the All Cup Tour is yet another unique feature of Double Dash. Overall, Double Dash feels a lot more fair than its console predecessor of Mario Kart 64. However, it's still a challenging game in the higher difficulties, and the All Cup Tour will absolutely test your abilities to stay sharp in every race. The music in this game is good, for sure, don't get me wrong. I like the soundtrack. However, there's something important to note here. I never listen to this music outside of the game. For me, that's a little bit odd, and it certainly indicates it's not one of my favorite soundtracks by any means. I listen to game music all the time, including some of the other Mario Kart titles, mainly Mario Kart 8. Video game music is a huge part of my love for the hobby, and soundtracks from like the Mega Man games, Katamari, and other Mario titles are frequently blasted during my day job. Double Dash just has never been one to catch my ears and go, oh yes, this needs to be played at a time outside of the game. That does not make it a bad soundtrack by any means, there are plenty of good tracks still. I'm a big fan of the Mushroom Bridge / Mushroom City song. Fast-paced jazz is awesome and it definitely complements the atmosphere. If there's one thing I'll give the soundtrack, it's that it certainly is fitting to the tracks you play on. The song for DK Mountain and Dino Dino Jungle sounds exactly like what you would expect. The songs all serve their purpose, and they serve it well. There is one song that I will say is distinctly the best in the game, and it's this version of Rainbow Road. I know I'm an incredibly biased narrator here, but this one is without a doubt the best Rainbow Road in terms of the theme and the track itself. If there's one song I would listen to outside of the game, it would be this one. That trumpet part that usually times up with the speed booster segment is the first thing I think of when the Double Dash soundtrack comes to mind. Smooth McGroove has an awesome acapella cover of this song, and I must note how covers of video game songs are also great for the preservation of their legacies. A lot of GameCube titles still hold up really well today, at least in my opinion. Games like Mario Sunshine and Double Dash are both very pleasant to still look at. We have a lot of bright colors, and it seems like a huge improvement over 64. Just compare the visuals for Luigi at Mario Circuit to their Raceway counterparts. The difference is astonishing, and the jump from the N64 to the GameCube was simply incredible. Looking back on things like this makes me so happy I grew up in this era since I could appreciate the vast improvements. Unlike today where the graphics change so little from generation to generation now. The visuals of Rainbow Road are mind-blowing, and I still think it looks incredible over 20 years later. There are just so many colors, and the moment when you're up in the air and slowly peering over the course makes me say, wow. Some courses don't look amazing anymore, I'll give you that, like Waluigi Stadium. It's pretty dark and muddy, so the colors don't do a whole lot. Also, this game's Bowser Castle got completely knocked out visually by Mario Kart 8's as well. I'll definitely admit that the GameCube visuals have become dated over time. However, it's not as obvious as the N64's, and there's still a lot of charm to them. Of course, we don't just talk about the in-game artwork here, so it's time to delve into the case and manual. Starting off with the case here, we have one of the most iconic cover arts of my childhood. This image is totally just burned into my memory. You know, you got Mario, Luigi, DK, Diddy Kong, Peach, Daisy, and then Yoshi and Birdo there in the back. All the icons, and you can see team up for twice the fun. Pretty cool. And then here we have double the fun. So obviously very, very heavy emphasis on the 2 players. See 1 to 4 players simultaneous. Something of note here is the broadband capability noted on the back of the box. We will definitely delve into that a little more as we go. We see some good screenshots, some Grand Prix, some battle mode, and then a bunch of the different character pairings because they have to show you, yes, you get 2 racers. And this is my own copy. I do have a not for resale box. I'm not sure exactly how I got that. Like I said, this has been in my collection forever, so don't really remember. Moving over to the manual here. Again, this is my own copy. These are my own scans. So the same image that we have on the cover. So we have a pretty long one here. Pretty long table of contents. Over 36 pages. That last one being about LAN setup. Yes, that involves the broadband adapter. And something I had no idea what it was talking about when I was a kid, that's for sure. So yeah, the Double Dash, Grand Prix, double the riders, double the fun. I'm not going to sit here and read through too much of this. This is a pretty lengthy manual. And this font right here, this font's pretty hard to read. So I'm not really going to bother, but you can see here just they're explaining the game's key mechanic of having two drivers or one driver and a thrower that you can switch between. So we have our controls for single player. And then, yes, there is also co-op in this game. So you can have 2 players in one kart, but I don't know. I mean, maybe they thought that mode would be a little more popular than it is, because every time I play this game with people and I explain to them that you can do that, nobody ever cares. So everybody just wants their own kart. But my sister and I, when we would get bored, would sometimes play the co-op together, but that's about it. Your driving techniques. So you drift, your mini turbos. Yes, you can also steal items in this game. I didn't mention that in the control section, but if you hit an opponent, while using a mushroom, or run into them while using a star, or side attack in the co-op mode, you can steal the item, which is pretty cool. It's kind of hard to pull off, so I didn't bother mentioning it, but pretty fun when it does happen. So, a whole bunch of explanations of stuff. I mean, look at all this text. This is crazy. Explanations of the items, pretty standard. Here's some great artwork, the characters. This image of Mario and Luigi is so awesome. I've used this before on thumbnails and other stuff for other videos. For example, my buddy Brian, aka Crepuscular Sky, and I do have a podcast, and I talked about some Christmas memories, and this was, of course, a Christmas present game, and I used this image of Mario and Luigi in the thumbnail, so be sure to check that out. And here's some more of the pairings. They don't give away any of the unlockable characters, so that's pretty good, I guess. And just some really cool artwork of all of them. Okay, and then we have the characters, and then we have the carts that go with the characters. So explaining, light characters, medium characters, and heavies. And, if you use a heavy and anybody, you have to use a heavy car. You always have to use the biggest size. You can't put Bowser in the baby carriage, unfortunately. And then talking about our various modes. So, this video, we've really only focused on the Grand Prix. There's a whole lot more to this game too, but for the sake of time and scope, I just focus on the Grand Prix really. Explanation of all the modes, and then we get into our course list with some cool screenshots of all of them. So, looks like all the screenshots are the ones that they use in the menus for the previews as well. Battle mode, pretty neat, battling on top of the GameCube. A lot of good memories with that too. Don't worry, I did play battle mode. All right, and then this is the section that is just so peculiar to me, the LAN mode, where you can have 8 players. I never had an opportunity to do this. You would need, I think, 2 GameCubes and 2 broadband adapters. So, as you can see, it's pretty complicated, and, I was a little kid, so there was no way that I was ever doing this, and I know my parents were never going to bother trying to set this up for me, so it's pretty unknown stuff, but and our last page is just for notes. So that's that. But we're going to talk a lot more about this whole broadband adapter and LAN deal in our next section here as well. Currently, the GameCube is in a very dangerous position when it comes to historical risk. There's hardly any official recognition of the console or its games when considering modern re-releases. We have a few, but it's very lackluster. Many GameCube games, including Mario Kart Double Dash, are only available through original hardware or emulation. Therefore, the prices of the original copies are also very high for a lot of these games. I think a big part of the lack of recognition is simply due to time. We have Nintendo Switch Online for every major Nintendo home console before the GameCube, but then the line is drawn after the N64. Perhaps Nintendo just does not think of the GameCube as retro enough to deserve the same recognition as the other consoles for now. I would argue that they are wrong, since many folks, at least those younger than me, do consider the GameCube retro. This debate creates the need for some sort of standard. In traditional historic preservation, the Department of the Interior has the standard of a building being at least 50 years old before being eligible for status on the National Register. Video game preservation needs to also set some kind of standard for what we consider a historic, or let's use the term a retro video game. Now, technology changes very rapidly, so I think applying the same 50-year standard would not be appropriate. If we did that, we would be all the way back in 1975, which would mean the NES would be another 10 years away from being considered retro. So that's not really going to work. Let's cut the metric in half and look at the past 25 years. That puts us back in 2000, right at the turn of the generation from the N64 to the GameCube. Therefore, if the standard were 25 years, the GameCube would just be turning the corner into that retro territory. This thought process clarifies to me why there maybe has been so little recognition of GameCube games in modern times. Sure, many games from this era or newer have received re-releases, and we even covered things like the Katamari games on this channel. So this video is me telling Nintendo to step their game up with the GameCube. By my logic, the GameCube is starting to become historic and retro, the prices of the originals are already sky high, and people deserve to have an easy way to access these phenomenal games. Not having anything outside of original hardware or emulation alienates a huge population base of fans that would love to play GameCube games. Many folks can't afford the originals, don't want to bother setting up old hardware, and also don't want to go through the trouble of emulating. Think about the non-gamers or the casual gamers of the world. Many casual fans enjoy Mario Kart, and it would be great to have an official remaster of one of the most unique games in the series. Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about something nobody had, the broadband adapter. As a kid, I only experienced Double Dash offline, playing either single player or local multiplayer without any kind of LAN or anything fancy like that. However, this game had broadband support, sort of. Using this obscure GameCube accessory that I never owned and never knew anybody who did own it. The only clue I had about this mode was from the back of the box where it indicated broadband support and showed this peculiar screenshot. Talk about something that has the potential to become lost media. Based on what I found, there was no true online for the game and it's limited to LAN. However, there seems to have been some fan support that allowed the game to be played over the internet years later. This leads me to ask if there is still an active community for Double Dash online play. If you have any other information on that, please leave a comment and let me know. I'm super interested to know about that. At the end of the day, Mario Kart is one of the most popular Nintendo franchises of all time, so I don't think the game will be lost to time generations from now. The name alone will carry it to some form of preservation. Right now, the GameCube library overall is just in a rough place. Of course, many tracks have also been remastered in future re-releases, which is a decent way to preserve some of the legacy of the game. However, currently I'm still going to put this game's historical risk as moderately high because of its poor accessibility to modern players. The most obvious thing to be done is to have any kind of official recognition from the big company. For now, we, the creators and their audiences, need to keep pushing for these kinds of things in the industry. Okay, it's time to have a little bit of fun with some nostalgic memories from my childhood. Since Mario Kart 64 was the first game I ever played, Mario Kart Double Dash was the first sequel I was ever hyped about. I distinctly remember seeing the TV ad where they show the two characters switching places.
Drive, throw stuff, switch, Mario Kart Double Dash.
And my mind was completely blown away from that. That had to have been sometime in the fall of 2003, since I remember getting the game that Christmas. For many years, Double Dash would then become one of the cornerstones of my collection and one that I never got rid of. In my family, I was pretty much the only one who was really into games. My sister played a fair amount of games with me, especially Mario Party 5 and a few others, including Double Dash. My dad was into the first Zelda and Tecmo Super Bowl back in the day, but he didn't pursue many games after the NES. However, my dad and I actually played a lot of Double Dash together. We did a lot of Grand Prix in the split screen mode and unlocked a lot of the stuff together. I remember getting things like Special Cup, and the first time we played Bowser's Castle was intense, and I have a clear memory of that. Something that was really rare, but I do remember, is seeing my dad actually playing this game on his own a few times. That fact alone really speaks to how impactful Double Dash was on the household, and just how dang fun it was. After all the playing and talking that I've done for this video, I can distinctly say Double Dash still holds as my favorite Mario Kart, and I'm not sure if it'll ever be beaten. There was a time where I thought Mario Kart 8 really had me, but the way Double Dash took so many risks and has all these unique features is what really sets it apart now. Like I said, I'm as nostalgic as it gets for this one, but I do still feel like this game has a lot of viability in modern times. So if you haven't seen it yet, be sure to check out my breakdown of Mario Kart 64. Also be sure to subscribe, since I'm hoping to cover more and more of the Mario Kart series in time, and I cover a bunch of other games on this channel as well. I have a playlist of all my reviews here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.